Hey guys, what is up? This is Matt. Today it's me once again. Welcome back to another movie review, part of the Halloween month season or whatever. I don't have my inflatable bluey thing up there because, well, it's downstairs. So yeah, but I decided to just wear a horror themed shirt for the sake of the season for the videos. But yeah, anyways, this time I'm going to be reviewing The Haunting. Believe it or not, I never actually seen this movie before. However, 10 years ago, I did watch the 1999 remake. And all I remember from that film I just remember not being scared and just thought the film was just extremely goofy. And compared to this film, it had so much that the 1999 film just added stuff to the movie that it really did not need. Because, man, do I have some things to say about this film. If you've never seen the movie before, it's about this woman named Eleanor Lance who joins up with a group of investigators to study a place called Hill House. And from there, we got ourselves less of a haunted house story and more of a character study. Mostly, it's a character-driven film, as there isn't a whole lot of haunting elements to the film because this was made in the 60s, and movies back then used a very big lack of special effects, though in the 60s they definitely started to boost things up with their ratings, like with films like Rosemary's Baby, Psycho, Night of the Living Dead. Though this film is G-rated, if it came out today, it definitely wouldn't be G-rated. It would be more on the lines of PG-13, because you cannot make a G-rated horror film nowadays, because that's pretty much impossible. In fact, even with G-rated horror films, they honestly don't earn the G rating. But still, it's hard to believe how so many movies that came out in the 50s and 60s and all that would be G-rated. Nowadays, it's very rare for a movie to get the G rating. Like, it usually happens like once a year or every 2 years. Yeah, but I gotta say, I really wish I watched this movie sooner. While it may not be talked about as much as most 60 horror films, like the ones that I mentioned, and The Birds, which is having its 60th anniversary this year, along with this film. So yeah, because this movie is now 60 years old, it's the perfect time for me to review it. And man, this movie manages to have a lot to it. And even though it doesn't really have a whole lot in terms of scares, I still feel like it has a very good atmosphere to keep the movie going. Because once in a while, we do hear noises throughout the film. Sometimes it's in some of the characters' heads. Sometimes characters can actually hear it. But really, though, what makes this film so unique is the fact that it never needed a massive amount of special effects in order to be spooky. Because it's the characters themselves that make the film feel more spooky, because sometimes the house will get into their heads, and sometimes other characters can hear it, and sometimes they can't. So the fact that they're studying to see if this house really is haunted, some others believe it, some don't all that much, but it focuses a lot on the main woman, Eleanor Lance, but also other characters like the doctor and the supporting cast of characters like Theo. It has a very good use of character development that I was really surprised with. Like, I actually really like the characters and what exactly they had to say about this house. And though it is a little less than 2 hours long, it's around the hour and 50-minute mark, it honestly felt like an hour because I was really invested about where the story was going throughout this film. And the movie is in black and white, so that might be boring for some people, but it gives it a more chilling feel. Like, black and white horror movies were very common back, of course, in the 30s to the 60s. You know, with the Hammer horror films and all that. So I feel like it's more chilling in black and white. Like, it never needs any of that color. Neither did Night of the Living Dead or Psycho, also black and white horror films. And as the movie progresses throughout, I just felt like it was getting more interesting as the film progressed. And the movie never really feels like it slows down when it comes to its character development. And because the film has such a unique atmosphere, and the scares that it manages to give once in a while makes it very unique, as it has a very lack of special effects. And sometimes when it does come to the effects, it can be a bit noticeable. Like, there's this one scene where a mirror falls and you can clearly see the string, but that can be forgiven since it's a 60s film. The fact that it uses very little effects is very impressive. Like, it really never needed like a massive amount of special effects or gore or like just flat out, you know, people dying. I mean, there is death in the movie. Again, this film is G-rated, but there's literally a scene in this movie where a woman hangs herself. There's also parts to the movie where Eleanor basically talks to herself in her mind, and sometimes I don't really feel like it was always necessary because, you know, it just basically tells us what's happening right now. That doesn't happen throughout the entire film. Like, sometimes it's necessary, but other times it isn't so much. But really, though, what makes this movie work is the character development and how they all have something to say about this house and feel like they do have a purpose to this entire thing. If slow burn horror movies aren't really your thing, chances are you're probably not going to get why this was so well received, but for me, I can definitely see why. The fact that this was remade over 30 years later was completely unnecessary because this movie really never needed it. It's a heavy character-driven film that manages to have just enough in terms of its spooky atmosphere, characters, and a very well-made set. And with the amount of scares that it does have to offer, which is very little, it's like 20, maybe 25% of scares, as there's nothing that really jumps out at you. But this is definitely a horror film that I recommend starting with, or one of the horror movies I recommend starting with if you want to start becoming more into horror, because it's definitely one of the more tamer horror films. Despite its G rating, it still manages to push the limits because it has a few uses of swear words, but it might not be as iconic as those other 60s horror films I mentioned, but it's really one of the most unique ghost stories out there, and it's a film that really revolutionized the ghost story genre. And we rarely ever get films like this anymore because most horror movies, when it comes to haunted house stories, the characters really aren't that interesting or all that. But I was really interested in what the characters had to say about this place, and I was on the edge of my seat watching this at home until, of course, the very end. I kept my expectations really low with this one, although I knew I was going to enjoy it, but enjoying it this much, it honestly makes me want to go back and watch more classic horror films that I haven't seen before. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I cannot tell you guys how excited I am for Killers of the Flower Moon. I already got my ticket in advance. I'm going to see it in IMAX. All I'm going to expect from that movie is another work of art from Martin Scorsese, and I wouldn't be surprised if it makes my best of the year list. Also, Spider-Man 2 comes out. It's already getting a good amount of acclaim, so hopefully that'll live up to expectation as well. And of course, I will have more horror reviews. Just, I haven't been doing a whole lot of them because, well, I have other things to do. So that's why I am serious when I say I'm not doing as much this month as I did last October. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Word out.